Start the recording. All right. Well, hello, I'm Geoffrey Jennings, and I'm joined by KronusWinter here in the PressCorps Studios. Cronus, how are you?
A little late and a little tired. I've been communicating with quite a few people, so Foxhole seems to be a job more than it is a game sometimes, but good. I hope you're doing well too.
I absolutely am. You've described on your broadcasts on Twitch that Foxhole is the dream game that you've always wanted since you were little.
Yeah, I games like this where coordination, cooperation, production, and economy has been something I've always been looking for in a game because I don't know if it comes from the fact that I've been in the restaurant business my entire life, but something about making something for someone else that they thoroughly and really like enjoy is just something I've always enjoyed. I've always liked doing that. If I can make you a nice meal that makes you come back for another one, not only does it mean that you're happy by the end of the day, I'm happy because you ate it, and this is a game just like it. I make things, I get things done, I do things that maybe some other person maybe not might not have the time to do or the tenacity to do it. Like for example, something we've established and we've been working on is we build harbors. The game doesn't have any like set areas where we can put like cranes onto like docking areas.
At least not yet. Mhm.
Wait, yeah, at least not yet. But I have somebody that is in the Winter Legion logistics, and he loves the build. So I send him out to certain areas, and it takes days to do this. But we get reinforced areas for our freighters to come in and out, and it's a logi hub, and it's a lot of fun because the excitement I see on people's faces when the like we're bringing 5 or 6 cranes up one time, and this guy's running escort with us. He doesn't know what we're doing. And when we finally get there, he's like, "What is the point of all this? Why are you wasting time?" And I'm like, "Dude, this is what we're doing. We're building a logi hub to shorten the trips for people because not everybody wants to spend 30 minutes driving." And once he got it, it was so much fun for him. He was so excited, and I love that. I love it when people can take a game and take something and do something that it's not mechanically part of the game or like a mechanically part of like you're doing something that the game sort of allows and doesn't allow. It's exciting and fun, and Foxhole allows that to a degree because of how dynamic it is.
Mhm. And certainly here at Early Access, there's plenty of room for things that maybe aren't intended may soon become very much intended. In fact, that's how some of the best features make it in.
Oh yeah.
The restaurant analogy, where you're in the kitchen waiting for things to be presented out for the front line, or in this case, the restaurant. That's a very good analogy. I never thought of it like that.
Well, because I'm from the restaurant
Yeah.
and the factories and the refinery. So I have a position in my group, and you're called the cook. And the cook is the person who sits by the refinery, refines stuff into material, and then you go to the factory and you cook for us what we need, and you fill the orders. It's fun, playful banter, but it's exactly how I feel what this game is because you got people in world chat going, "I need shirts," and it's like it's gonna be a minute. It's coming. We're bringing shirts. I promise you.
Yeah, well, banter makes any good outfit. And you know what? Speaking of which, you are head of WLL or Winter Legion Logistics. Can you describe the outfit and what may attract others to join?
Well, as much as I am the head or the creator of it, we don't operate in a hierarchy. For example, since I'm offline, there's a senior member on right now called Spins. Now, everybody who works in the Winter Legion logistics needs to understand that many people call us a clan because we have the clan tag, but there's no command structure or all right guys, we got to do this, let's get it done. It's simply I find that more people enjoy the game when if they join the op and they say, "Hey, what can I do?" We don't say go do this, we rather say what would you like to do, and then we present the options available. um for example, the other day I really needed people driving freighters. Sadly, nobody in the group wanted to do it, so we ended up having a large stockpile of material. Well, it turned into 45 filled. No, not 45. It was 44 filled containers and one fuel truck. So what we got together was a giant operation of 10 whole freighters. Oh, well, it was 9 freighters, and a 10th was one joined us, and we shipped all at once all these freighters to abandoned ward. And all the players were so excited. I had a 20-man op. People were talking about it. They were having fun. And then the chaos of unloading and reloading and doing things with the freighters. Everybody had so much fun from something that might have taken a day and a half to prepare. And there's no other game out there that I can think of where you just get this really cool situation where you've got freighters going downriver carrying supplies that I was so surprised to wake up the next day to find that most of it was gone. It had been used on the front, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
And that's what makes it, because in Euro Truck Simulator, yeah, you're doing the same thing, but what makes it here in Foxhole is the fact that it matters what you're delivering and it gets there. That's what matters, as opposed to simply, oh, I've
Right.
reached Germany. But that's that's such an awesome story, and I'm sure you got dozens more like it. So going off of that, in the current logistics metagame, what is the most effective thing? Asking for advice here. What is the most effective thing logistics personnel, dedicated logistics personnel, can do in terms of the logistics game?
Biggest thing I tell everybody, I hate the storage depot at the rail line. If you're working in Westgate and you're trying to deliver to like abandoned ward or Ulster, skip the damn storage depot. If you it's the sad state of the not the sad state of the game, it's just the way the mechanics of the game work in its current state. Is we've done some math because we wanted to see what was the most effective route, or how to ship more goods faster. And the one thing I have found is skip the storage depot, put it in a storage container if it's going 2.5 hexes away. If it's going 3 or more hexes away and you have to do a lot of turns and curves, we've actually learned that it's more efficient to use just the regular truck with 15 slots, 16 if you carry a box on your person. Because the time it would take to recover the flatbed and return it, you might as well have returned to the home region, teleported, and then just grabbed another truck and filled it. And this is again by skipping the storage depot, because the storage depot, I understand it's an anti-grief system. If you could just empty a depot, drop the stuff, and it just despawned, it's a nightmare. But if you have ever sat there and tried to pull out 15 howitzer shell crates, like, blessed be to the person who farmed the sulfur, made the sulfur, produced it, and then I'm sorry for the guy who has to pull it out. The pulling it out is just not an engaging activity. It's not fun to sit there and wait a whole minute for 3 items to be put into your inventory.
So then, going off of that, what are
Sorry.
so no, that's fine, because the advice there is pretty much skip the supply depot, and
Yeah.
you're saying even in this case, skip the flatbed.
It depends on the so it depends on the distance you're traveling. So they
Sure.
recently updated it so that you can pull you can pull crates out of shipping containers,
Hmm.
same way you do at a storage depot. Now, if you're going to a front where there's no storage depot, you can use a flatbed. But what we do at the Winter Legion Logistics is we don't fill the front line because we don't know what the combat situation is. Instead, what we do is we bring it to the nearest, safest storage depot. Storage depots hold 100 crates of whatever's in there. So once we deliver them there, there's 2 things the front needs, and that's a truck to make deliveries, not a flatbed, because flatbeds are expensive. They're RMATs,
Hmm.
and people with the scarcity, which I like scarcity, and I can go into that later because it's got its good and bad in a game like this. Is if you take a flatbed somewhere, and that's my last flatbed, I don't have the option to build one. I have to build 5. So that costs, I think it's 120 RMATs, 125. 150?
I'm not sure off the top of
I'm
my
not sure.
head.
Either way, the cost of replacing it, even if I had to replace just 2, I still have to make 5. It, I can't spend the RMATs just for 1 or 2.
Yeah, they have to come in a pack of 5, so the gate
Yeah.
there's already high to begin with. The cost.
Yeah. So the 2 biggest issues that you have when doing logistics is if you are going wicked far away, the trip there with a flatbed becomes pointless because if you're going to return with an empty container, your trip back feels completely unrewarding, right?
Mhm.
This is part of the changes that they did to the resource container. Adding the resource container. Instead of being able to stop at a field, drop your shipping container, and fill it up, and then move on and return with materials, players enjoy that. You give them like A to B back to A, but on the way they got to stop somewhere in between. They like that because the trip there is rewarding because you've helped supply the front. The trip back is a chore. And about chores, people play games to play games, not do chores. But logistics in this current setup feels a little like a chore because the time to pull out from storage depots, the amount of time it takes to harvest with just a sledgehammer, the harvester has definitely made it more engaging and a lot faster and more, I guess, fun. I've definitely seen players once we go from sledges to harvesters, they thoroughly enjoy harvesting sulfur and components.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Um, I kind of went on a tangent and I lost the
That's
point of what
fine.
we do with storage depots. Yeah,
that's the current state of things, and that's quite
Yeah.
all right. And for someone who's been in the thicket, as deep into the thicket as you have, I'm sure you've got a lot to say. So you know what? Naturally, off of that, what are some of the top changes you'd like to see to make either the current tools more relevant, or maybe take out certain tools and mechanics altogether? How would you improve the situation, make it feel less like a chore and more, hopefully, more rewarding?
So, something as a logistics player that hurts a lot is partisans. And I understand partisans are a real part of the game, and like, there are certain people who only play this game because they are a partisan. And for logistics, they have a lot of power over us because one of them somehow in an LUV or a motorbike can carry enough ammunition on them. And if they have a smoke grenade, they can do a lot of damage. And building is something I've noticed logistically that's hard to get convinced people to do because it's just left click. It's left click. It's hold the left click. And it's 100 hits. And arguably, it's like, well, if you send 3 people, it's done faster. That's a manpower issue. That's a population issue. We don't need to talk about it because this game, I'm sure as it improves, the population grows. But that's another tangent I can quickly go off of. But for logistics, changes that need to be made is the back and forth for having these logi hubs where refinery and factory meet. One of the things I've noticed is that we capture frontline factories like Ulster. We captured Abandoned Ward and the Baths. We had 3 frontline factories, and behind them was 2 relatively close refineries. The problem is that pulling BMATs out from a refinery, 60 at a time, you pull 1,500, or you could pull 4,000, but then you have to crate them. Crating them means that you have to bring them to either, I would argue that you bring them to a storage depot, you pull them out of the container into the storage depot, you can pull 3 crates at a time, 300, and then you have to put them back in to another building, and then you have to do the pull 60 at a time again. Versus, go to a refinery where you have your personal queue, pull out 1,500 with a single click, go to a factory, fill the factory, get your inventory cooking, and by the time you've done that versus using a frontline factory, how much more could you have done? Because I think it's like 15 minutes just to cook garrison supplies, 5 minutes for 4 shirts. And I've had a lot of people, veterans of the game, say you should really be utilizing these frontline factories more. And it's like, it's tedious. It's a system in place to stop griefers from completely ruining one side's chances of winning, but it also ruins somebody who legitimately wants to run an operation on the front when they don't have a refinery specifically next to them or in the same hex. For example, in this war, I took a challenge and I said I was going to run Fisherman's.
Mhm.
Fisherman's is literally one end of the map has the refinery, one end of the map has the factory, and in between is a harbor/storage depot. Just the driving with 1,500 BMATs back and forth,
All over that, even that region alone.
just that region alone, just trying to like get the shipping containers filled, get them moved, and it's like, yeah, if I had the manpower, this would work, but it's not as efficient as if I went to an area where the refinery and factory are right next to each other, because I can do the job entirely myself. I don't need 2 or 3 drivers bringing me BMATs constantly, because 1,500 BMATs, it sounds like a lot. You can burn through that very quickly. Just making some high-end weapons. And that brings me back to another tip I would love to bring up. If you have frontline factories and you can get someone working them with BMATs, have them make the ammo. Because if you're shipping an item that costs 100 BMATs, it's more cost effective to ship just the BMATs up there, because they might not necessarily need that crate of rifles versus the 100 BMATs. Because as you compress items down, like 140 BMATs would take up 2 slots, where a crate of 140, I believe, that storm rifles would only take up one slot. You got to look at your time travel versus BMAT compression ratio.
Oh my goodness, these are some very intense numbers, but I'm sure one that logistics knows very well by now.
My brain hurts sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. So, are there any other changes that you can think of to make your brain hurt a little less? Because, so I guess one devil's advocate would say, um, well, aren't these, long range logistics, aren't these supply chains? Isn't that what makes the game? Isn't that what makes the logistics game happen? Isn't that the fun of it? Isn't that what it is?
That is the whole bit of the fun. The problem is the unrewarding time. It's dead time. You get a lot of dead time after the delivery has been made.
Right.
Like, there's something exciting about going to the front and making a frontline delivery in a truck. You bring 15 crates of grenades, and then people are like, there's 500 grenades in here. And you're like, well, this is what you do. You pull 500 grenades out, you throw it at the wardens. I'm sorry, wardens. Just you're my enemies right now. You throw it at them, and then, it's like any game. Explosives move the line. Indirect fire moves the line. People are like, give me rifles, give me ammo. I give them grenades, and the line moves, because how do you stop a grenade? You get away from it, and then
all in a span, but all in a span of 7 minutes.
Right.
When it took 2 hours to make that.
Well, it didn't. Maybe not 2 hours,
Sure.
but the logistics behind it is make a bunch of stuff, bring it to the front. The front eats through it way faster than the amount of time it took to make it, deliver it. The problem is that once you've made the delivery and you're on your way back, the risk is gone, the excitement is gone. It's all right if you're in a green truck, like a green truck, you're in a canvas top truck or soft top or whatever people like to call them. Arguably, yeah, on your way back, if you're not going to a storage depot but rather to a logi hub, which you could bring components, you could gather some salvage from people leaving them behind at boxes. But if you don't do that, your return trip feels boring. Like
could it be argued that making the delivery, supplying that front line, seeing all the joyous, ravenous masses of troops at the front, wouldn't you say that would be the climax of an operation, equivalent to taking a town if I were on the front lines? Isn't that kind of the climax of your part of the game, your part of the war?
So, as a logistics member, this is what I've noticed. I've got about 500 hours in to this game. 90% of it is logistics, and
just getting started, huh?
Yes, just getting started in this game. It's so addicting.
Yeah.
So the part of it is like the driving. Like, I understand I'm making a delivery, and it's gonna take me a while. The early game, it's simply shirts, grenades, and weapons. As the front becomes more complex, as weapons start becoming unlocked, new explosives start getting made, it becomes a little more tactical. You have to think, this storage depot has this storage depot has that, and it starts becoming more engaging. It's fun to think about. And then, like, for example, if I've noticed if I want to push a front, I will bring heavy explosives, howitzer shells, mortar shells to a front. And if I want a front to hold, I only bring them rifles, ammos, and shirts. And gas grenades. Gas grenades are a great way to hold the front. You throw a gas grenade, 9 out of 10 people either run away from it or they will run towards you, and then your rifleman can take care of the issue. So a logistics member actually can control the way a front pushes because give them grenades, they throw them, they push, they take dirt, and that's another aspect of the game is that it's a lot of taking dirt. Um,
Yeah.
Again, this tangent just keeps going and going in my head. And it's like I gotta
That's fine.
stop. There's
That's fine.
so many things.
This actually gives me insight into what it's like for you on the field running supplies, because you probably
Yeah.
got your head in 10 different refineries, 10 different stockpiles, and 5 different fights going on at the same time.
I will tell you about the start of this war, Friday and Saturday,
Okay, yeah.
when it started, and it was just rifles, grenades, and simple material. We unlocked the SMG and the medical supplies. It was a constant supply of BMATs coming in and out, in and out, in and out. Which BMATs in themselves are something that have to get shipped to the front, and because the storage depots can only hold 100 crates, 10,000, it's a mess for my logistics team because I think the average day a minimum requirement is 50,000 BMATs to the front.
Mhm.
So we have to get containers organized on the front and everything. And Friday and Saturday, there was nobody working in Heartlands. There was nobody working in Westgate. And I'm sitting over there on Fisherman's like, where the hell's Logi? So I moved my Logi group to Westgate, and we started running things up to, I believe, Ulster was enemy territory at the time.
Mhm.
So we were filling out the storage depot and Mara. I had emergency drivers sending things to the front, and the thing was is that because we knew the front was so heavily engaged, every trip was exciting. Every back and forth was okay. We need more grenades. We need more rifles. We need more shirts. But as the front slowly starts to crumble down into okay, here's the line, they're holding it, the excitement on the back and forth starts burning away for players, and it's less like I need to get this here to okay, we got to just stock them up so they can do it, and then on the return trip you're kind of bored because you got nothing to do. You can't stop and salvage because you're in a flatbed. You can't. Um, it, it's the nuisance that is the game where it's hard to do. If you could get somebody on the front and you deliver your container, and somebody was like, "Yo, here's a container with 4,000 components or 4,000 sulfur, even 4,000 salvage," the back would be a little more fun. Because when we had the freighter trip, all those freighters, the unload, the this and that, the moment it came to cleanup duty, like moving the containers back, sending the freighters back, my group of 20 went to 9 to 8. And it was because the fun part was over. It was, oh, I gotta go. I gotta go.
So what I'm getting is, what I'm getting is then once it plateaus into more of a stable line, a more of a grind where lines are more established, and then suddenly it becomes an obligation to supply,
hold the stalemate.
to hold the stalemate essentially, just to hold it, not even necessarily push up on it, but just to hold it. At that point, that's when the excitement begins to plateau, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because what's happened now is the front becomes so fortified because the defenses in the game, you get these insane people who are like, I'm just gonna put 15 pillboxes right here, and if you don't have HEs, your only option to destroy them is like 25 to 30 frag grenades, and that's if somebody's not fixing them, and then you have to argue howitzers. To me, howitzers, I love them and I hate them because howitzers move the line, but at the same time, they're super hard to counter once they're shelling your line. You know,
Sounds like a decent trade-off then.
it's a decent trade-off. It moves the line, but at the same time, it's what kills the line because Nobody likes getting killed by indirect fire. Something that kills you that you can't see is by far one of the most annoying aspects of any game. But in a game like this, I really wish there was a way to mitigate that annoyance. Like, for example, the T3 um,
Town hall?
field base. No, not the town hall. The field
Outpost,
base that
right?
you
Yeah,
built.
yeah.
The outpost, I guess it's. I don't even know what it's called. I don't do frontline. I just do logistics.
Yeah,
What's a gun?
yeah. But the tier 3 version of the outpost, right?
Right. It allows you to go in it, and I think you can fix it, and it protects you from artillery fire. But until you get to that point, um, you've got like two choices: get shelled to death, and that's really it. Once like did you see the video that Psalm posted recently where
Yes,
they
I
did
did
a
with the 15 howitzer
15
guns.
howitzers? Um,
Could it be argued then that the the cost of operating such a valuable piece of frontline equipment or battlefield equipment is its high cost, the high cost of materials and the high cost of shells in order to keep it going?
uh, no, howitzers are cheap. 150 BMATs, you get a howitzer. It can hit 175 meters, and it's one heavy explosive per shell. So I know it's a 1 to 20 ratio, but you got nothing else to use sulfur on in the early war. I mean, I put a war 36. I put 120 crates of howitzer shells in Lockheed. I mean, even frag grenades in Umbral, that war, before we even had the ability to mine sulfur. Well, we had the mines for sulfur, but not the fields. You know, I couldn't crank out that many. We went to Umbral. I put 140 crates of. I keep saying this is something I promised my Logi crew I'd stop doing. I got to stop doing that because I say I, but I might have arranged this to happen, but it was the Logi crew who did it. It was, Spins, Iron Warrior, Zeus, Vic. There's so many names I couldn't
Sure,
even list
sure,
them.
and it's good to give
The Logi
credit,
crew
but
did it.
but would they have done it without you telling them to?
I'm sure they would have done it. They would have done it to a degree, but they always see. They want to know which front to fill and where to fill it. It becomes the most important part.
Mhm.
Uh, and as much as I hate the storage depot because you got to spend time pulling it out, a frontline storage depot is probably the single most important place you can capture and secure for your Logi routes. Because if I can bring 5 or 6 flatbeds up there with my Logi group, I can unload so much material so fast. And as long as it stays secured and it doesn't get burned or captured by the enemy, that material will hold the front for days.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you said you mentioned before that you didn't like the storage depot, but when it's on the front line, then you like it.
Yes, because when it's on the front line, that's where I can put everything. If I send two and a half
Are
containers to the front
you're
with
talking
one item,
specifically? You're specifically talking about the storage depot, not just a
yeah,
town hall. Anything with a stockpile.
no, no. Storage depots are my. If they are, if the storage depot is in a hex that is just one away from the front. For example, Westgate to Ulster. If you're fighting in Ulster and you're coming in from the east, like we have been this war, you fill out the storage depot in Mara, or you fill out Mercy's Wish. If you're fighting in hexes like Abandoned Ward and Umble, you fill out Fearmore. You want the Logi on the front to be a driver who goes a little bit of his way to a secure position to grab everything his commander wants and then bring it to the front. Where if I said, hey, you got to come all the way to Westgate and get it, he's going to say, fuck that in a box of chocolates. And I'm sorry if cussing is not allowed here, but
That's fine. No,
I
no,
didn't mean
that's
it.
fine. It is. So is there a way to make a backline storage depot, or at least fix that problem, or how would you approach it if you had the reins on that?
My crew and I have discussed this a lot. And we've agreed, like, some of the best things that could be done is like a credit system. Like, you mined something, so you get a little credit. Okay, you refined it, you get a little more credit. You made it into something, you should have by that point enough credit to pull out what you've made. Like, I don't do any mining myself anymore. My crew does it for me, and I say I need scrap. They go out, they get me scrap. I put it into my personal queue. And this is something that one of the developers, I don't know his full name, his name is EM. I showed him this trick. It's been posted on Reddit. It's called the Endless Cube exploit or trick. Um, it has been the single thing keeping my sanity for this entirety of doing logistics. And it works like this. You fill, all right, let me start simply. You have to have more salvage cooking than what your inventory can hold. And a simple way to do this is an easy example that people follow is grab some salvage, probably 1,000, cook 900 of it into explosive materials. Then you have that 100 left. Split it into any odd number, and leave it in your inventory. Fill the refinery's inventory with anything other than salvage. Then fill your inventory up until you only have that odd number of salvage. You press cancel on the cooking time, and because the game tries to throw away or remove all of the current product being cooked, it will move it to your inventory or the refinery's inventory. But because it's full and you have an odd number, it removes an odd number from your refinement time. So if you did it to BMATs, you would have one left over. And instead of saying, okay, there's room, let's remove it, it continues to process that one piece. So you never have to remove your material from the refinery. It becomes a personal bank.
Okay. As
Yes.
opposed to it becomes a personal bank as opposed to one that has to be picked up regularly, or?
So what happens is if you have 5 minutes left on your BMAT counter,
Hmm.
and if you put more salvage in before that 5 minutes is up, it'll increase the timer again. So you're playing like a game of play the catch up, so that you don't have to ever empty your inventory. Because once that timer ends, whatever has been made has to be put into public or used, so you can't make more.
Oh,
Which
okay.
right. So it stops people from hoarding. But if you told me, hey, you need to supply the front line by sitting there pressing right click to pull out 60 BMATs at a time, when on an average day, if I play an 8-hour session, I can go through almost 50,000 BMATs, you're damn right I am going to not do logistics, because it is absolutely just unengaging. Just sit there and right click and right click. I do it for things like explosive materials because that takes forever to cook and everybody has to make it. But if I had to do it for everything, I would lose my mind.
So this exploit has kind of become something that you wish, that you hope, is to just simply become the norm in the future.
Personally, if they removed it from the game, like if they next patch or next war they said we're removing this, I wouldn't play anymore. I wouldn't play, at least for logistics. I wouldn't do it. And that's, I don't know which groups you could ask. Psalm, Raid, Iska, One CMD. These are all colonial clans. I work with in tandem with them to feed their fronts. They place order requests through me for certain material, and I get it to them, and they're very grateful for it. I don't know what the if this is an achievement or an accomplishment, but in War 34, I went from an officer cadet to a captain, and then in War 36, because I didn't play in the others, up to War 36 really, I went from a captain to a major, and I'm already halfway through major because I enjoy filling orders for people. Somebody says I need a container with rifles, ammos, explosives to this degree, or they just say, could you fill my depot up because we're going to run an op. Instead of these other clans who have to worry about doing logistics, farming the material, making the material, I can just feed them, and then they can just go out and do the fun stuff, which is blowing up the enemy and ruining their day. But to them, it. Oh, hey, we lost all our shirts. Well, here's 300 more, which is another issue that I have with storage depots, is that they have such a small limit. Like 100 shirts is only 1,000 lives. I can create that in a day's session if I don't make any garrison supplies, which is in itself another nightmare I can talk about for endless hours.
Well, it seems like you're just perfect for this role because that's a sentiment not often expressed. With Foxhole being a 24/7 war at all hours of the day, and really, even though there certainly are down times, theoretically, if the whole world, if everything is in one big war, I hesitate to say one server because technically that's not correct. There are multiple servers. It's simply all the servers are working in the same instance of the war.
Right.
But
It's the same instance.
it's the same instance, so we'll use that word. But yeah, with everyone around the world being in the same instance of the game, uh, it could be argued that in order to function, you kind of need kind of like shifts of logistics or kind of 24/7 logistics in order to keep something up and running. Of course, even though that's not feasibly that's not feasible unless this Foxhole were to blossom into an extremely popular game. Being one of the turning into one of the MMO titans. But until we get there, round the clock logistics is very hard to come by, which is kind of needed in order to keep things stable. Um, but I guess that's just the fun of it. Do you have any comment on that? Just the need for round the clock.
So to resolve the round the clock issue, because I will sometimes log on in
If it even
Eastern
is an
Standard Time.
issue, even if it is an issue, it could be argued that that's just the nature of how it is.
Right. But the thing is that you could have 10,000, could have a million people playing this game,
Mhm.
and if one side has no player that wants to do logistics, you have an issue. Or if you have an entire team that just wants to do logistics, it's another issue. Part of the reason why my logistics group is we're so close knit and together is because we don't want to work in the busy areas. If nobody's there, we prefer to work it. Like War 34 was my. I love Orebreaker. Orebreaker Island, I love you. You are perfectly set up for harbor. You're set up for harbors. You're running freighters. You're good for sending material out to almost every corner of the map. Don't change Orebreaker, but the devs are. I'm gonna cry internally. Anyways, um, you go to a busy area like Westgate,
Right.
and if you had 30 people trying to do logistics, trucks going back and forth, people trying to dump their material into the refinery, it's like there's not enough room. The developers have said, and they're going to lay things out on a grid. They're going to make more room. That's perfect. You still come to this issue where, as this game begins to blossom and you get more and more people, what is the solution to more and more people? Do you just add more and more maps, more and more logistics centers? But you have a game with scarcity of resources. So if you have one team with 90% of all the RMATs, oh, they're going to steamroll you with tanks. How do you come back from that? You know, the maps have. You could definitely say more players in Foxhole would make the game better, but at what point does more become an issue with the scarcity of resources? Which I argue there's not a scarcity of resources. There's an example of this being is my flatbed issue. I make flatbeds. I bring them places left and right. Some people will bring resources to the front and use them. Some people use them as taxis. They bring a container of stuff they think the front needs. They leave it because they want to go on the front and shoot. I either have to send somebody out looking for them to find them because it's that, or I spend more RMATs. Then I have to convince the person not only to find it, drive it all the way back. This only really becomes a problem when armored cars become unlocked. Armored cars suddenly become unlocked every. I'm sorry, staff sergeants. I was a staff sergeant, but it's always a staff sergeant. It's a lance corporal. It's you're all. I love you. You'll understand once you know the cost of this. And I've had so many of them go, "Wow, is that really a problem?" And I go, "Yes. You're taking my flatbeds. All right, I've got 5 drivers and 4 trucks. I got to go make another one, or I just got to make 2 trips for one container. One person who's now either going to be driving by themselves, or I got to wait until I fill 4 more containers and then send them." And they start making an armored car. They don't look in the storage depot. They don't look anywhere for an armored car. And I say, "What are you doing?" "I'm making armored cars." "You're making 5 armored cars. You put 60 RMATs into it. Now I have the choice between, do I blow it up and waste 60 RMATs, or do I make 5 more?" And then they find a flatbed. Like, what are you doing with the flatbed? I'm bringing an armored car to the front. Okay, are you gonna bring it back? No. And then I gotta make more flatbeds,
Yeah,
and then I run out of arm mats.
this is all a conundrum of which there are options, but a majority of the options that doesn't involve someone simply doing the right thing, but
Right.
most of the other options come at a cost that one can ill afford. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's it drains on you pretty quickly, I can imagine.
It, it's kind of like, again, the issue with the 24-hour war. I go to sleep, I have a bunch of things set up, I've got my trucks parked, there's nobody on. I go to sleep, everybody on the night crew logs on. Some of them aren't part of the Winter Legion logistics. They move everything, and then my group, we end up having to go around. We have to go find it. We got to build them. Um, People, this is something that's also an issue, is once we start unlocking tanks, what do people do? They grab a freighter. That's 600, 500 RMATs to make 5. But they grab a freighter, they hoard some petrol, they put the petrol in a fuel truck, they put the fuel truck, they put the tank, they put a truck full of shells, which shells, as long as it's not a light tank, they put the shells, the 75 millimeter. If they're using BTs, they put the BT in the freighter. They go out into the middle of the ocean where there's no radar coverage. They park it. They lock it. They drown. They grab a speedboat when they log on, and the next day they drive all the way over to it. They grab it. They bring it to the front, and they're like, "Hey, why is the front losing?" Well, the front doesn't have shirts because instead of sending 5 containers with one person with my low manpower, I have to send one at a time. And
I love how these are all very specific enough to tell
oh,
their true stories. Um,
I got stories for days about finding battle tanks hidden
I'm
everywhere.
sure. I'm sure. And you know we could keep on going on this, but well, let's switch topics a little bit. So you enlisted in the Foxhole War not too long ago during War 30. Despite
About
having
halfway
500
through.
hours, that's not too far back. So what initially drew you into Foxhole, and what has kept you around? I think we answered the what has kept you around earlier because
Logistics.
yeah, you're so satisfied by it. But what initially drew you in?
Well, the start of it, my friend told me, "Hey, Foxhole got a new update. It's a lot of logistics, a lot of back and forth." And I was playing games like RimWorld. I was playing games like Oxygen Not Included, City Skylines, things like that. I really enjoyed it. Uh, Single player games didn't really do what I really wanted from a video game. So I got into Foxhole. I had no idea what I was doing. I went to Endless Shore, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, "What?" Well, I didn't go to Endless Shore right away. There was a lovely person whose name I cannot remember. He was a second lieutenant. I remember his rank. He was running around. He gave us boot camp training. He taught us everything. One of the biggest things I pulled away from that was you're gonna die if you're carrying a lot of stuff on you and you try to go for a swim. So that was amazing. I started the game. I had no idea what was going on. I saw a front. It was Endless Shore. I had no idea what I was doing. I was running around. I was seeing the chaos, the mess, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I realized everything was player built. I was like, "Where's the just the things that developers put in?" And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I, being brand new to the damn game, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm grabbing a rifle, grabbing like 5 grenades, grabbing a med kit. Apparently, you can't heal yourself with a med kit. You need a bandage. Anyways, so I'm running around. I have no idea what I'm doing. Everybody's just dying on the road, dying on the road. I'm like, okay, so what does this all cost? I ended up going to Umbral Wildwood. There's a place called Foundry there. This is probably where the start of the Winter Legion logistics started with Intraxon, Spins, Eggboy, my great people. And, it was, what are we doing? Oh, we're making BMATs. What are BMATs? Oh, BMATs make guns, ammo, buildings, and all that. And I was like, so BMATs make everything that I was using, including the buildings that I was running through, the sandbags, the barbed wire, the walls, the turrets. Yeah, I was like, let's make more. And then it started from, here's a couple of cranes, here's a couple of flatbeds. And then as our group started to get a little bigger and bigger, it was, 5 flatbeds going to fields. We're all mining together. We're getting a crane there. We're building bases to defend the fields because partisans. And then we unlocked freighters, and we're like, oh my god, freighters! And then we started moving 5 containers back and forth, and it just became so much fun to do something so simple. And then as it started to grow into, I can actually use these BMATs to make weapons in a factory, and then bring it to the front. I remember like doing that by myself. I'm sitting at Shackled Chasm, and I'm
Mhm.
pulling materials out of this refinery. I'm making things in the factory. I'm pulling out of the storage depot. I'm filling containers, and I realized, oh my god, I'm going to bring all this to the front, and it's going to get used by a person to win the war. Oh my god, yes, let's do this. And I was smitten. I couldn't say it anymore. I was smitten. And as the war started to progress, the Winter Legion Logistics Group started getting bigger and bigger. I Spins is somebody who does night crew for me. I had a War 34. I think the Winter Legion Logistics operation was 24/7. It had like low manpower during like the United States late hours,
Uh,
the AMs. But something was always getting done. The mines were constantly being tended to. The fields were being mined, and this was ore breaker. Ore breaker had sulfur. I don't remember not ever making howitzer shells. Like if there was a front and I was feeding it with my winter with the Winter Legion, it had howitzer. It just had howitzer shells. Just the group effort made everything work. And if I had to do all this by myself, it wouldn't work. It's. I love the fact that like working in a kitchen. If you're trying to feed 300 people, 400 people, or in this game, I think at the time, 500 or 600 average players, maybe 800 at a peak. You work with those around you to get it done. And when it's all done, at the end of the night, you're looking at all the storage depots and you're like, we filled that, we filled that, we filled that, we filled that, we did that. Look at that. And then, you come up with crazy ideas to try and, finagle things. And then it was like, dude, I hate the storage depot. I was like, yeah, we all do. Shipping containers, just shipping containers for days. 434, the Winter Legion Logistics, before we could get freighters, because it was such a long drive, we couldn't find people to do anything. So we had 50 or 55 filled containers with materials. We couldn't move them because there wasn't enough of us. We could bring two at a time, but in the time it took me to go from ore breakers to Fearmore, which was our main storage depot in that war,
mhm.
um, I could have filled 7 more containers with the amount of time of the scrap to tend to the sulfur mines, and it was like, it's not worth it. And then I found a couple of guys, and they were like, dude, you did all this? It's a field of containers that you can walk through. You can pick which one you want, cranes in between. It was the coolest thing, and people were amazed by it. I was like, Mike, this group did it. Winter Legion Logistics. We need drivers. I went to bed one night. I came back. All the containers were gone except for like 4. And I looked around the map. All the supplies were everywhere, just everywhere. And I asked him, I was like, there was 3 of you. And he was like, yeah, we were bored. And I was like, so there are people out there who love to do basically Euro Truck Simulator, but finding them in this game is a godsend. If I find one, I want them in my group. I want them to work with us, like me. You're going to drive for 45 minutes back and forth? Do it, please,
So
because
yeah,
it's so rewarding.
it's so really what I'm getting here is it's the opportunity combined with the imagination, and just the chance to accomplish all this in a war, um, towards something bigger, much
Right.
bigger than yourself. This war machine, this kind of drive towards victory, at least participating in it. That's what draws you in. That's what drew you in. That's what keeps you in.
It's the only thing that keeps me. Honestly, if they made logistics to the point where if scarcity wasn't a thing in this game, I would feel less inclined to do logistics because if any other person could just go out and do their own thing, I feel like I haven't accomplished something.
Mhm.
It's like, sure, you could have spent 2 hours of your life making something. I could spend 2 hours of my life making a bunch of stuff for everybody. But if everybody could get their own thing without me having to be part of that cog, like if everybody was their own machine, it's just not as fun. The fact that the Winter Legion logistics team can sit around and fuel the war effort, and we know that the material is being used, and everybody is going out there, and it's just I don't know. I love scarcity developers. I know you get a lot of shit for scarcity. I don't think you have too big of a scarcity issue, and I've talked with this before. It's possible that even having not more of the same resource would solve it, but more different types. Like, what if you needed rubber to make trucks? Or, it's just like, it's logistics.
Instead of just BMATs.
Well, it's not necessarily that's a good thing, because people would say, well, if I got to make a truck, I need rubber and B-mats. Yeah, I'm just saying things like flatbeds, like logistics. Our nightmare is we have actually quite a few nightmares, but one of the biggest nightmares is cranes. How you want me to drive a crane? How far for how long to get to where? It's like, if and then I drive it all the way up there, and some guy's like, "Well, we need a crane on the front line," and instead of getting his own, he grabs that one. I go to do a delivery up there. It's like, I can't make my delivery. And sometimes I go to the front line, and it's like, we don't have a crane. Why? Because it got blown up.
Sure.
Okay. Why was it on the front? Oh, because we wanted it here. And it's like, so where's the flatbeds? Oh, we blew up the flatbeds to get the containers off, and I'm sitting there losing my mind, like, what do you? I don't know.
So it's not necessarily scarcity is the problem. If scarcity isn't a problem in your eyes, then what is when it comes to logistics? If there is one at all, I'm sure there is.
Well, when War 34, we learned our lesson about scarcity pretty hard, because we couldn't get RMATs. We had sulfur, but even sulfur, once you start unlocking like field artillery and stuff, you get all these people coming up here, and you get the field. It respawns. You harvest it. But then you got 15 people there because they all want their sulfur, and it's like, you didn't get a lot. You didn't get a lot at all. And everybody's got their own little personal bank, which I said is the best thing ever, but like, this is the issue. So personally, in this war right now, War 37, I have in my personal queue about 7,000 RMATs. Between everybody in the Winter Legion logistics, we probably have about 15,000. And the reason for it is because we made sure that when a field spawned, we harvested it, we refined it, and every time we see a staff sergeant running for the construction yard, I love you, staff sergeants, we go, what do you need? I want an armored car. Check the depot. We made 30 of them. Go. Or we go, hey, look at abandoned ward. You can build one. It's less a scarcity issue, and it's more of how it gets used issue. War 34 again, because that was a 2-week war and I was doing a lot. One thing I did find is you go to the corner of the map. There's a truck there. What's in the truck? Oh, look, 1,500 BMATs. I mean, RMATs. What's in this box in the middle of a bush in the middle of nowhere that has no right being here? Look, there's a shit ton of HE mats, and there's a crap ton of RMATs.
So you're saying
it's nothing.
So if I'm reading this correctly, it's not so much a problem of how the logistics game is. It's more so a problem of how everyone else uses it. How combat uses it. How combat uses the fruits of logistics.
So, yes. If you're somebody,
go ahead. Yeah.
Well, see, this is why I opt for a personal bank system.
A personal bank of all resources,
all resources, all of them.
Specifically resources, not necessarily weapons.
Not weapons, just resources.
Just resources.
That's all I care about. Because, okay, so we have an issue, and we don't. We in the Winter Legion Logistics don't have this issue often, because we're usually working in a refinery area, factory area. That's not very popular. It's far from the front. It's not as easy to navigate or whatever. And this has happened a few times, and I don't know how the developers or how a moderator would handle it. Let's say you go to a field, you harvest a crap ton of components. It's to harvest one stack is like 20 hits.
Mm-hmm.
To get 4,000, math in my head I can't do because I'm tired. 4 times 2. Okay, there we go. Anyways, you put it down, you enter it into the refinery, and there's a guy with a truck there, and he starts pulling it out for you, and he's refining it into his personal queue. Now it's like, you just did all that work and you want it yourself. You can kindly ask, hey, can that be for me? Now you'll get the people 9 out of 10 times, they'll say, sure, they'll let you have it. Then you get the people there who don't care, they take it, they'll take it, and they'll say, well, it's for the team. And in all actuality, what happens is they just want to make a BT, they want to make LTs, they want to have the material needed to make their toys.
Yeah, they say it's for the team, but it winds up being for their own purposes.
Once battle tanks and tanks get unlocked, get in a speedboat, go to any dark corner of the map, look for a freighter. Guarantee you there's a tank in it. Guarantee you there's a tank or there's a truck with materials to make tanks. There's production. I have found so many of these. I remember, again, War 34 specifically. Again, it was a staff sergeant. Comes over and I'm running freighters, delivering materials to abandoned ward. We have he drives up in a BT, and I'm like, whoa, BT. No idea where he got it from. It had no ammo in it. It had 100 frag grenades in it for some reason, just like loose frag grenades.
Huh.
Right. Huh. It's like, what are you doing? Which that's another thing I could talk about for the inventory system. That's a mess. And he has a fuel truck for it full of petrol, like a lot of petrol. There's like 43 cans of petrol. He's like, I was like, what are you doing with this? And what are you doing with my freighter? And he's like, oh, I saved this for later. And I was like, what? And he's like, I'm saving it for later. So he puts everything in the freighter and he starts driving away, heading west. And I'm like, okay, wait. It was about 5 or 8 minutes later. I get in a speedboat and I drive straight. And I'm just like thinking, where did he go? And there's this like little river that it starts disappearing into the void. And I go there and it's just a freighter sitting there locked. I pull my wrench out, I wrench it, and I'm looking in there, and it's the tank and it's the truck that he put in there full of fuel, and I'm sitting there like, I understand you want to have your fun with a battle tank. I understand that everybody should be allowed to play with the toys, but taking something that costs, and the way I do costs is if I have to replace one and I have to make the 5, it's 500 RMATs. It's not 100 RMATs. It's the 500 to get the 1. So I have to. The decision is do I be cruel and make it so that when he wakes up tomorrow, it's not there? The sad thing about it is, if a partisan showed up, had a wrench, magic their way to getting a crane there, they get a BT that they can take and drive away with it. I was in Umber Wildwood and I was looking for lost freighters because I didn't have the RMATs to replace them. I find a freighter and I'm like, what the hell's a freighter doing here? I see a crane. I go, Neither of these vehicles were locked. A fuel truck again with, I think it was like 30 petrol, and a BT with 40 75 millimeter shells and armor-piercing rounds with ammo sitting in the woods, not locked, not secured, just hiding off radar. And it's just like, okay, they were doing it again. Both of these tanks were brought back to Abandoned Ward, and the Winter Legion logistics team, which wasn't even official at the time, it was just a group of us who like doing logistics, we just went to World Chat and said, we found a toy, who wants a toy? People took it. I didn't care at that point. It's just, materials get used by people who want to do things personally, where I have strictly asked everybody in my group, if we have excess, send it out. And now, earlier I said, probably between everybody in my group, we have probably like 12,000 RMATs. Well, we check the fronts. Do you have mortar tubes? No. Make some mortar tubes. Do you have RPG tubes? No. Make some RPG tubes. They specifically need RMATs to make concrete bunkers. Send them some. Like, I don't know if they're there anymore. Ulster, there was 1,300 RMATs up there.
So you would advocate for a personal bank system for every player?
When you have to pull your material and you want to keep it for yourself and you don't have the exploit going, your option is to go to a corner of the map, build a blue box, and hide it there, and make sure you go back and fix the box before it decays. Or if you're somebody who's like, I don't even want them, I just want to harvest, and you put it in the public queue, you still reach this issue where people will show up, it's in public, they put it into their truck, then their truck ends up on a corner of the map. We're reaching the point of the war right now, day 131 that I can see from this little bot. You start driving around to the corners of the map where people wouldn't go. There's no reason to go there. You might find a truck. It's probably got some supplies in it. The issue has been getting better as people understand the cost of things and how if you're saving too much material, it becomes a problem. But at the same time, if you're not saving material, you unlock tanks. And instead of rolling out with, you know, 10 tanks, you're rolling out with one guy who built 5 tanks because he has to, but he's rolling out with one because he wants to go play on a tank. Which, again, not an issue. The problem is that it is a little bit against the team. Uh, I have some people who they'll build the 5 tanks and then they'll hide them in storage depots that there's no rightful reason for anybody to go there except for me because I'm insane and paranoid. And I go there and I find a whole storage depot with 3 FA, 2 LTs, 5 half tracks, and I'm like, this is either a clan's personal bank or this is just a couple of people who are like, we want the toys to play with them. uh, Scarcity is fun because it makes material worthwhile. Scarcity is bad because how do you make it so that the people who legitimately want to help the front don't have to worry about this material disappearing? You make 1,000 RMATs and go to bed, and it's in public. You wake up the next morning, you should expect it to be gone. You shouldn't expect any of it. But you know, without the exploit, you make 30 RMATs, and you have to take them out to put more in. That 30 RMATs is now free game. No matter what you do, they're going to disappear. Because someone somewhere, I do it all the time to shove them in the factories now to make HMGs or tubes, and it's like it's in public. I assume it's for everybody. Uh, but you also get the issue like today. Actually, today I had I think it was a warrant officer one. He ran around to all the factories and to the construction yard. He was pulling all the RMATs out, and he went to make armored cars. And I was like, he got halfway through making them, and I said, "Are you out of RMATs?" He said, "Yeah. Do you have any more?" And I was like, "No, because you just took them all out of the factory. You just took them all out of the refinery. Did you know that there's 8 armored cars in the storage depot?" "Oh, I didn't look." And again, I reached the option of, do I blow up his halfway finished armored cars, or do I finish them? Uh, so 9 out of 10 times, if there's room at the construction yard, I ask my crew, park the vehicles in front of the construction yard. If they see the armored car, they won't make them. If they see the half track, they won't make them.
Yeah, it just sounds like the player base needs to know that
it's an education problem.
Yeah, it's an education problem. Yeah, and that's a tough subject to really tackle. Simply because the only way to do that is to build a good tutorial system and a new player experience. But you can't do that until the game's finished.
Right.
So I guess that's the catch-22.
There's no point in making a tutorial in a game this early because the way they do logistics now is enjoy it thoroughly. But it needs changes. It needs timer changes. It needs to be more rewarding on your return trips.
How would you make it more rewarding on the return trip, if at all?
So the simplest way I've made it more rewarding is in Ulster this war. We can only do like 2 freighters at a time at the port at Ulster, so I don't have to send a big crew up there every so often. I just get the occasional driver. But from Westgate to Ulster, it's a drive, and it's a nightmare. That's why we've been building the harbor base. That I do believe I got the message today that it's finished. So we're going to try and cut the travel time from Westgate to Fisherman's to Farrannock to Lockmore to finally Linnamercy, and we're going to be cutting it down to just Westgate to Lockmore to Linnamercy, which I really hope this works out. But what I've noticed is up in Ulster, there's 2 component mines and 2 sulfur mines. And all you have to do is you load up on the freighter there, and you have 5 shipping containers. But if the team that's been working in Ulster grabs 4 or 5 full resource containers, all of a sudden the player is not doing a chore of returning an empty freighter to me because I want those empty containers back because 5 containers is 500 left mouse clicks. It's mind-numbing work, and I love you, Slowpoke, and I love you, Peas. 2 people in my group. One of them it was Slowpoke, made 38 shipping containers for me, and then Peas filled them all up. when I went to bed.
Mm-hmm.
It was nonsense. But so back to the tangent is, we sent a freighter up there, 5 containers, and it's container pollution because we leave them up there, and they take garrison supplies. So throw a couple of HEs, get rid of them, 500 BMAPs, BMAPs, what whoop-de-doo. But now my freighter is making a return trip with 12,000 components or more, or we're bringing a fuel truck back to be refilled, and that's, the player doesn't feel like they're doing nothing anymore. It's like, ooh, I can go back. I'm doing something for the team. I've brought components back. These can be refined into materials. And then the next time they do a freighter delivery, I'm like, you remember those components you brought me? Well, here's a bunch of HMGs. Here's a bunch of LUVs. Bring them to the front. Partisans need them to go piss off logistics on the warden side because they do it to me.
So you've effectively described the problem here. How would you better improve the return trip?
Exactly. Give them something to bring back.
Give them something
Make
to bring
sure
back. Okay.
A two-way trip. A two-way trip. The most effective logistics routes is when I send someone out with stuff and they come back with stuff. And it's a little more rewarding because the drive back and forth is just a mess. And even though...
So is that really a game problem, or is that more so just people need to develop that habit?
Well, this is a issue that we have with trying to do this is you need somebody who's willing to sit there and make the containers, which again is holding left click for a resource container is 50, a shipping is 100. You need to have somebody who's willing to babysit these mines, fill these containers, put these containers in a flatbed, and then bring them to a destination where they are safe and can be easily unloaded and loaded. Now, in Ulster, this is nearly impossible because you get this one little sliver of land where you can put the 5 resource containers, but then you have to bring the shipping containers to the depot. There's no room to do it. You put them there, and then the containers end up cluttering the road, and it becomes more of a mess than it's worth doing. And at the same time, Westgate to Ulster by freighter, again, that's so many hexes you have to go through. And some people have loading issues. I specifically remember a Russian member, STR Crusader. I said, why are you always an ore breaker? I never see you anywhere else. And he said, oh, switching maps for me is a risk. Switching a map means his game crashing or not being able to reconnect. And I've had reconnect issues where I disconnect while going to the other side, and you have a 50-50 guess to where your guy is sleeping. Because if you reconnect before he dies or disappears, you can go back to right where you were.
Sure.
The problem is that if you're going from like Westgate to Lockmore, to Lockmore, and you think you went to Lockmore, you click on Lockmore and you spawn there, and your body's there, that's good, you'll spawn back right where your truck is. You pick the wrong tile, you spawn at the starbase, and then you have to run up and grab your truck. Another logistics issue is that I will find vehicles everywhere, and I have no option to do single-man recoveries short of go back to a vehicle factory, no matter where it is, build a little motorcycle, go up there with a wrench and fuel, unlocking the vehicle, driving it back, and it's a chore. Because in that time, I feel like I've accomplished nothing except, you've recovered a vehicle. I recovered a vehicle that if I had simply had some way to tow it, it would have been a lot easier. Or like sometimes what me and the logistics crew will do is we'll grab just regular 100 BMAT trucks, drive around with supplies to a front. Instead of 40, it's 15. They get a little bit of a buff, and then we go around, we grab flatbeds, and we drive them back. It's a nice little recovery op. It's annoying to do because the drive time sometimes it's like it just takes too long, especially if you're doing water logi from Westgate to Lynn. It's too long. It'd be nice if there was more optional waterways. It'd be nice if there was like a dam or like a can't think of what it's called, Panama Canal
Yeah.
that we could spend our mats on opening up. Like Widow's Whale is a little lake that is right next to sorry.
That's fine. I'm looking on the map too.
Yeah, Widow's Whale. It's in Lockmore, and it's like a big lake.
Uh-huh.
And if there was a way to spend some points like RMATs, I don't even care if it was like 300 RMATs, 400, 500 RMATs, hell, make it 1,000 RMATs because it's something that cuts down on travel time. I would spend that in a heartbeat if I could send my freighters from Westgate to Lockmore to Lynn. It would be cool if players could somehow drive the option of how the war flows, because something that's super easy to notice in every war is you take roads, then it's all the fights happen on roads 9 out of 10 times because that's the only place Logi can get to. If you say, hey, we're fighting up in the middle of a field somewhere, Logi's not going to take a truck that goes 2 miles per hour and you can walk faster than it. They're not going to take a flatbed that requires a crane directly to the front and there's no storage depot because unloading is a nightmare. And, the fights always happen on roads, which for me as a logistics player, that's fine because it allows me to figure out which storage depot I'm going to use pretty quick. But for fighting, I feel like it's killing the game a little bit because you lose the dynamic of where the fight will shift.
It's predestined almost.
Yeah, if there's a road, I can guarantee you there's going to be a fight there. This isn't a bad thing because if you have a commander who can see on the front, we're going to lose this position, you send a couple builders back, they build a fortified position, and you try and, you're fighting over the dirt between towns. 9 out of 10 times, if the Colonials are fighting from the south to the north, from Saltbrook, they just go straight up. There's no left flank because if you go west, the road's curving and it's not a straight line, so you lose a lot of time. Where there's that one road, the pits, I think it's called, you go straight up and it brings you to Callahan's Boot, and you're fighting an abandoned ward. The problem that I've seen with this is that people get blindsided and it's just like, okay, Logi just got cut from the rear. You just lost all those supplies in the front. You want me to restock it, and it's like, I can't. I just can't. If you're going to just keep going up a line, but I can understand it because if you said, hey, I need Logi in the middle of the map where there's no road, I'm just going to sit there and go, yo, as a logistics player, I'm going to go, no, be near a road. Roads are fast. Dirt is slow, and the option to this used to be, it used to be before the debuff to flatbeds was bring a crane there because cranes are pretty much the same speed no matter where you go. And then if you had some poor soul who wanted to slowly unload a container and fill your base, good. But once the flatbeds got nerfed, I was less inclined to go to the middle of a dirt area and do any form of logistics. Hell, if there's a salvage field that doesn't have a road leading to it, if I'm in a regular truck, I'm probably not going to go there unless I'm desperate for BMATs. And if I'm in a flatbed, it's just a pain in the butt. So the war is predetermined where the fighting is going to happen depending on where the roads are, and logistics is going to be where the storage depots are, because it's faster to go from like Westgate to Abandoned Ward to fill that depot than it would be if I went from Westgate to the front and dropped it off. Though the front might be happy about that. The amount of time it takes driving, I have people burn out. They make 2 or 3 trips and they're like, dude, I'm done. That's why I love freighters. You send one person, they bring 5 containers. The manpower issue and the burnout issue isn't as bad. Somebody burns out doing deliveries, I got to find someone else. And there's the classic frontliners who are like, do it yourself. And it's like, I'm sorry, I want to have fun playing a game, and driving one way to a front where you could supply a whole front and you could see it go nowhere. You could wake up the next day and it's either in the same spot or they lost ground, and it's like, I have no idea how this happened because I was asleep. I don't know. I'll bring you more because it wasn't because I didn't bring enough. Was it because the enemy was more well organized? This is the problem of doing logistics is you don't know who's running a front. If I'm working with a group that I know, like if I love Raid, if Raid says we're going to be working over here, I'm more than happy to supply their front even if they lose ground because I know the players and I know they're good. that just means that they're getting either out tactic or they're getting out supplied. And trust me, if someone says, "Hey, we're getting out supplied," you're damn right. I'm about to get really pissed off and do a 9 freighter, 10 freighter drop and abandon ward again.
So it sounds like people just need to use the operation system a little more, or at least have an
That
operation system that's much more easy to use.
the operation system, and this is a game where I don't know. I really wish I could talk to a developer about this and get their insight. Is what is their opinion about the one person, or not the one person, but the individual who does not want to be part of an operation ever? Who is the person who, like the solo players? That's the word I'm looking for. You know, the people who want to be in 2 or 3 man groups. Is this really a game for them? Well, they can go do things like salvage. Well, yeah, 2 or 3 people can go to a salvage field and they can do that by themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. But how do we balance this so that the people at the front, like, okay, you're on a front line, you're fighting and killing people, you know, there should be a form of like squad leading. Like, I love the game Squad. I used to play Squad a lot. Part of Squad was like this game. Get supplies, you bring them, you build a base, and then use the base as a forward base of operations to kill things. And I loved that about Squad, and I still love Squad for it. The thing is that in Squad, you are forced to basically join a squad. If you don't, you play a character that has, I believe you get the most basic weapon with 2 magazines. You know, you don't get anything out of it, so you join a squad. You have options. You have roles to play. I don't think roles fit squad. Roles don't fit Foxhole very well. But I really wish this game had a heavy, heavy hand that said, here's operations happening in this area. Make one or join one. And then there's like this tiny little button over here that says, nah, I'd rather do this solo. You know, there's the combat role and then there's the logistics role in this game. If you break them down to the most basic, simple terms, the combat guy is the guy who's making sure the line is held, pushed, or whatever involves shooting a gun in the direction of a blue man. Logistics is mine resources, refine resources, make resources, deliver resources. And if you're doing and a lot of combat guys end up having to do the last part is delivering the finished product to the front forward fob, which is another nightmare on the logistics side because War 36, they took a single fortress and someone put 600, 500 howitzer shells in there, and it was gone. So the enemy took it, they rebuilt it, they got 250 howitzer shells of our shells, along with all the equipment that was there. And it's another issue when the game starts having more numbers. It's somebody's doing this because they're like, oh man, 500 howitzer shells, we can obliterate the wardens. Well, those howitzer shells take forever to pull out of a fort by yourself, or like especially if you're doing it by hand, one at a time. With truck, you're still doing 3 at a time. You still have to get the CV up there. You have to build the howitzer. Then you field the howitzer. Then you need to know somebody who knows how to range the howitzer and use the howitzer. And it, as much as it's a player numbers game or an experience game, if you have the one person who's just like, I'm just going to put howitzer shells in here, and they take all the expensive material, then as a logistics player, I get a little burned out and bummed out because it's like, I made those to push the front, they're all gone, and there was no effort done with them. And then I have certain players who say, well, you shouldn't make them, and you should deliver them yourselves, and you should only give them a little bit at a time. And it's like, that works if I had an endless supply of people willing to make a constant trip of everything. The war is so massive, it's impossible for me to suddenly look at the front and say, all right, they're down to 5 rifles, when you don't, it's they could have 100 rifles. I could go back to mining for a couple of seconds, and all of a sudden 100 shirts are gone and 100 rifles are gone, and they have like no rifles, but they got tons of ammo. So I make rifles and I bring them to the front, and somebody just brought a whole truckload of rifles and they're out of ammo, and I'm looking at the other logi guy like, okay, we both filled this order, we both brought stupid. It didn't work. The frontline storage depot became my solution. It's put everything in there. Everything. ammo, guns, rifles, grenades, everything. You get the one idiot who puts. I remember one guy miscounted how many grenades were to a box in a fort in the most defended area. I don't know what he was doing. He just put them in there, and there was like 500 to 600 HE grenades sitting in there, and I was like, "There's no way for me to recreate those. There's no way for me to take those out and say they're in a stupid spot." Here was one that killed me the other day. Guy was trying to put garrison supplies in the townhouse. He didn't look at what was in his crate. Instead of putting the garrison supplies, he put 8 crates of howitzer shells, and I couldn't get them out. And I was sitting there like, I don't know what to say to that. Uh, I remember one time I had a guy who lagged out while he was teleporting to the next side of the map. His truck flew into the water, and I lost 40 howitzer shells. And it took me like 4 hours to replace those on the front. And for an average player, that's not possible. That's something I want to mention to the developers as well, is to do the amount of logistics the Winter Legion does. It involves people committing a crazy amount of hours to do some of the most basic things, and the argument can come down to it's a manpower issue. There's not enough players in Foxhole currently, and if you had more people, sure, it'd be easier. But how many people are you going to willingly have them do a job sitting there hitting salvage with a hammer before they get bored and they leave?
Sure, for every group of 100 new people that come into the war, maybe 10 of them, at best, might be interested in this.
Yeah, I stream the game a lot, so I get quite a few people who come in and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm doing logistics, and they see the logistics and they like it, and they join, they do it. But if they have 2 or 3 hours to play, the best they can do is do some salvage, or they can do a couple of drives for me, and then they're done. Overall, it's like you couldn't have accomplished everything by yourself. And no, I understand that the game is supposed to be a giant war where everybody's helping do everything, but I've still gone to whole areas where if you see Friday, Saturday, the first days of the war, you'd think it would be busy, lively. I had a period where Saturday morning nobody was running Westgate, nobody was running Heartlands, and the only thing I had to say about it was the storage depots were full. This was good and bad in the regard that somebody spent the time to make the material, but you could have all the material in the world. If it's not on the front, it ain't doing you any good. So what we quickly did, went to Westgate, we built containers, we all went to the depot, and we emptied the depot. And then we started making deliveries. In the first days of the war, Friday, Saturday, we filled up the Mara, what is it, Mara, Dearmore, Amethyst. Was it Amethyst? I don't remember. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was Amethyst because they were fighting in the baths. We filled up 5 depots that day. I can't remember which ones. I remember filling 5 because I remember doing 5 arduous trips in flatbeds to get materials everywhere that had been made in a rear line storage depot, but they hadn't been shipped. And it comes to the issue of, why did you make this material but not ship it? Was it a manpower issue? Was it because it's the most effective way to get commends and you just wanted a couple of commends?
My guess, my immediate guess was that they put in the effort to simply make the materials, and then from there they were satisfied. And regardless commends, just simply their effort was probably all okay. Well, I've done my part. I don't need to go any further, than this, because that involves I gotta cook it in a factory. I gotta ship it, possibly in a shipping container, and then transport it, and then drive the truck back. So, but that's a whole other 10 steps that maybe they don't want to do. That'd be my guess anyway.
And that comes down not to a gameplay mechanic or anything. It comes down to a population and player willingness to do something. But I think part of the issue with players unwilling to make these deliveries is you can fill a container very quickly if you work especially if you work 2 factories. You can fill a container with 40 items very quickly. The problem with filling that container is having the willingness to build the container, get it on a flatbed, and then ship it. If you're somebody who's producing materials and filling a depot, you're doing good work. You're doing something that needs to get done, because arguably the time to make, refine, pull from, if you had to pull not from a personal queue, pull from the refinery and make everything, yes, the storage depot is a much shorter amount of time. And but it's boring to the person who's sitting there and has to pull the howitzer shells, because it's like a minute. It's like a minute and a half to pull 3. And if you had to pull, 5 stacks of them, you're there for 5 minutes doing nothing, and it's boring. You can't even move your truck. You can't go and do something else when the factory. Like I'll be sitting there pulling from a depot, pulling howitzer shells out, and then halfway through pulling the howitzer shells, I have to get in another truck, go to the factories, and pull my stuff that's done cooking in the factories, and then start the queue again. Which is another weird thing about this game, is because a refinery is more efficient when as many people as possible are using it and pulling from it, but a factory can literally be run by 2 people, because it only makes one order at a time. So you have 2 people, you fill the order, and then you have the second person fill the order. The first is done, he pulls his material, and then he starts it again, and you repeat this process, and you get a factory with no downtime. It's a little odd to me, because instead of it being a team effort, it's literally whoever wants to sit there and do it effort. Um, and again, see, like as this game starts getting more and more into logistics, these tangents happen all the time. It's a time and what you're doing issue. Like a suggestion that we've had was, what if you made it so you could connect shipping containers or trucks to a depot? It could take the same amount of time to pull this material. Like, I don't care if it takes 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 10 minutes to fill my container, but in the meantime, while it's getting filled, let me go do something else. Let me pull more material from the refinery. Let me go look around the map. Well, you can look at the map when you're pulling materials, but you can't move. You can't do something while you're waiting, and it feels like time lost.
The ergonomics of that, how would you change it, if you could?
Simply right now is just like, if you could just put a container down into like a slot and say, I want these 40 items in this container that are from the depot. Okay, you do that, it pulls the 40 items, and let's say it took 17 minutes or 15 minutes. Hell, even if it took 5 minutes to do this, let me go do something else. Uh, the human attention span can only be for so long. Staring at a number get bigger and bigger, where if I had to go and pull B mats out of the refinery 60 at a time, I would sooner want to do that and see that number go up, because I know that while my container's being filled to get ready to do the delivery, or my truck's being filled to do the delivery, I can be over here pulling materials to make more materials, because the front always needs more things. There is no such thing as enough. If you could have 10 million howitzer shells on the front, do it. I hate howitzers because indirect fire sucks, but I love them because they move the line. You have 500 grenades. They move
Right.
the line.
So you're not. You're saying that when you click on right click on something to pull out, say, 3 howitzer shells out of a stockpile, don't just have it. Don't just have yourself be frozen there. You're saying be able to get out of your truck, have it still pull, and do something else. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's the gist of what I'm saying. This is also a nightmare for logistics, because one of the biggest supply things that we need as a logistics team, because we're driving around the map, is garrison supplies. We can build a base somewhere. We can defend the base. We can make it a base that not even howitzers could destroy. But if I have to go wait another 8 minutes or 10 minutes to pull garrison supplies out, it becomes how many bases before it's too many. And I understand this is an aspect of the game that's required, but partisans just have so much power, and even if you were to fortify every little part of the map, it just takes that one gap for them to get through, and all of a sudden, really expensive equipment starts getting lost, and you have to replace it, and it it's not even like the expensive equipment like harvesters that kill us, uh, or freighters. It's the cheap stuff that are super slow because it's boring to drive a crane a map and a half away because one person forgot to put it in a safe spot, so a partisan took it, dunked it in the water, and you know it's just not fun to replace. And it's like, why wasn't it in a base? Well, there was a base here, but it rotted away. Well, why did no one put garrison supplies in it? Well, somebody made garrison supplies. It just takes forever to pull them out. Or the fact that every blue box, every little thing eats garrison supplies, and it, it and again, it's also the chore of having to go there, put garrison supplies in the base, and then when you log off, if you're not going to be on for another day and a half or 2 days, you know, you show up and that base is gone. It's like, oh guys, why'd you let it rot? It's like, oh, I just nobody cared. You can have some people who I remember his name. He goes by Seed. You know, he does it by he picks one area of the map and he says, I'm going to put garrison supplies in here, and he'll put 7, 8, 9,000 garrison supplies in there, and he could be gone for days, and unless somebody has decided to build up the defenses there to the point where the garrison supplies are being eaten by the thousands in the hour, it's not going to be a problem. We have the problem in Ulster where this war, because we built along one side of the river to push into Ulster to take Ulster, there was a million defenses. There was a pillbox facing every which way direction, sandboxes, sandbags, blue boxes, barbed wire, the shipping containers for people who brought them to the front because I want to throw them off a cliff. The just everything, the walls needed to be put up, and it's like you needed this to take the front. Now what do? You can't destroy them because if you use a harvester, it counts as friendly fire damage. So eventually you get you get weapons restricted. You can't throw HEs because if you're throwing HEs that destroy all these defenses, um, you're going to get weapons restricted, and you're using a very expensive explosive to clear this area. It's almost easier to just enlist a warden to come over, give him the HEs, and say, "Do it," and I'll pay you. Just do it. I don't want to have to deal with something that's eating up 1,000 garrison supplies an hour. And that's what we did this war that turned out to be an issue. Was we had so many defenses at Ulster that we couldn't get rid of them in any logical way without getting weapons restricted. So we just said, let it rot. And we did. We let it rot. We let it rot. And then what happens? The wardens are coming, and we're looking at all our defenses that are like destroyed. And it's like, well, there was no way to fix this. How do we fix this? And you're down to structures with 30% health, and you put a brand new one next to it with 100% health, or you just fix them up, and you're back to the same issue where you have garrison supplies that it didn't matter how many you had. It's where are they? You could have I make 100 of them, and then the Winter Legion delivers them to the front, and either people pull them out, but again, I think it's a minute to pull out 3. That's only 300. That can last a small base a long time. But the way this game works is you take an inch of dirt, you put 3 pillboxes, 5 foxholes, barbed wire, and a wall, and before you know it, you're losing your mind just trying to do garrison supplies. And we can come back to this every time because it's an issue. It's manpower, but it's also willingness to do these chores. Um, like the 2 component mines I had at Rot Dust they were right next to each other. They were literally right next to each other, and on the way back, you could get sulfur.
You say chores. How many?
Yeah.
How much of this experience should be chores, in your opinion? Because certainly there's a degree of, well, you have to earn this. But at the same time, if that's a majority of the experience, at that point you've ceased to be a game. So where on that in this a very arbitrary very ethereal abstract idea of chore versus game, how much of it, where should it land if we could have this arbitrary meter?
Like any chore, you should have a tool to make your life easier. You make a mess on the floor, you get a broom, and if not a broom, you get a vacuum. Here come the toys to make things easier. When for example, running logistics is a nightmare, and you get very little done. Then you unlock freighters, you can get a lot done. Water logi saves so much time by, instead of having drivers going back and forth, um, it's one guy with 5 containers, because it takes 8 containers to empty a salvage field, 2 freighters, 2 people, versus 8 trucks. It becomes a manpower thing.
So you think Foxhole has the tools?
Certain tools need to be added to the game, like the harvester was added for frontline deconstruction for enemy structures. I would like to find a way to do friendly structures. I would like the honestly, I think defenses in this game are wholeheartedly underpowered because you just spam them. That's the rhyme and reason behind them. There is no reason on a front to not have 100 pillboxes facing the enemy. Besides, I mean, even they cost BMATs. They don't cost anything. You know, if you have a dedicated team going around pulling BMATs out, BMATs, they're nothing. They're nothing into the wind. 50,000 BMATs for one day's worth of cooking in a whole factory to fill 3 or 4 front lines. Easy peasy. We brought the Winter Legion brought 160,000 BMATs in a single day to the front at Lockheed when we had that. The next day there was like 30 left, and that was because people didn't know they were there. You have these people who are willing to literally build the most insane defensive lines that you sneeze a howitzer onto them, they're all gone or they're pointless. Because it doesn't matter if you got.
Yeah. So then, would you rather see them be more expensive, but also more sturdy, more powerful?
I like, for example, the pillbox, the concrete pillbox that you unlock later in the tech tree. I feel like this should be a lot more powerful, and it needs to be more omnidirectional. Not like fully omnidirectional. You should be allowed to flank it and kill it, and this is where the Foxhole comes in to defend these. I think I don't know which warden it is. I've seen these defenses. The warden puts down a whole wall, not a whole wall. He does 3 pillboxes facing towards where the enemy is most likely to come. So he covers more than 180 degrees of fire, and a pillbox does. I don't think the only way to kill a pillbox by running at it would be with a smoke grenade, some HE, or a couple of dedicated heavy machine gunners. And then what he does, he puts the foxhole behind it, so if you try to flank it, it's not as easy. I like this. I like the whole one concrete bunker that can hold a large area, because that's how they usually are. Some would argue that the fortress walls can do this, because the fortress walls are like the ones you see from your typical Normandy D-Day invasion fight, and they're facing where the enemy's coming from.
Less quantity, more quality.
Yes, because that's how defenses are.
If you could somehow, trade spam, but for stronger defenses and even more stronger, better, a little more omnidirectional defenses, you would make that trade somehow.
I would like to make the trade-off where, as you gain ground between 2 points, like let's just use abandoned ward because it's a meme. Everybody wants abandoned ward. So 9 out of 10 times, the colonials are in Saltbrook, from my experience. And on the northern side, already in abandoned ward, is the ward.
I'm sorry, did you mean the salt farms?
The salt farms, yeah. Sorry.
That's fine.
So they're in salt farm. Colonials are in salt farms, and because wardens can blitzkrieg, or the spine's closer, or whatever it matters. They're in abandoned ward, and they're already set up, ready to hold the line, and then fighting over a bridge that's like 2 bridges in or 3 bridges in to fight them. No, there's a footbridge, there's a bridge for vehicles, and then there's like this waterlogged area that I think you can get vehicles across. But anyways, so you end up having these 3 fronts, and if you get a builder and you take a little dirt, you just put pillboxes there. And then in the early war, how do you deal with a pillbox? You can't. The only way I found to do it is you have to painstakingly sit there, pull out a dumb amount of frag grenades, and whiff frag grenades at the line until the pillbox is dead. because even a builder can't sit there and fix it. And to me, that's just, all right, you see one pillbox in front of you getting destroyed, you put another one behind it. And then you see that one, you put another one behind it. And you can keep this continuous pattern of build going, where, unless you're talking World War One, people are sitting around building trenches because that's the easy defense. You take some dirt, you shovel it up, and there you go. You're covered from, you know, artillery fire, regular fire. World War Two, I trench warfare wasn't a thing because everybody had tanks. What's your trench going to do if a tank's driving up to you? You're going to look up and say, "Oh, that's a lovely axle you have."
Mm-hmm.
But in a real war, do you really have time to sit there uh, and build a pillbox out of concrete or wood? I think defenses need to be something that the fighting's gone. Here, it's time to fortify. Let's go. I'm a fan of foxholes being buildable by the average guy. Uh, it's weird that they cost material when it's technically just a hole in the ground. Um, it would be cool if there was more levels of defenses. Like, okay, we're going to be fighting on the front. What do you got? You got sandbags and you got a shovel. What's the shovel for? You can build a foxhole. You can get in the foxhole. What's the next step for a foxhole in the what's the next step for a foxhole in the game? Foxhole could be a gun nest. And gun nests, again, I don't do a lot of combat, but those things can really eat up machine gun fire. It takes a lot to kill them. So your option is HE grenades or RPGs or indirect fire from howitzers or mortars to take care of them. And those are really sturdy structures that they kind of I almost like them as a defense, but we're coming back to the issue where this all started from. You have 500 foxholes sitting around or 500 gun nests sitting around. If nobody decides to make garrison supplies, or if you can't keep up with the amount of garrison supplies needed to sustain it, what's going to happen is you're just going to have everything rot at the same time. It would be nice if there was a rotting order, like, something that if it doesn't get tended to, it starts disappearing first before everything else starts disappearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how to describe that.
I don't think so either.
Like walls to me are a little weird. I see why they're needed, but for like a World War One/World War II games, it's like, who really has the time to sit there and make this giant steel wall in the middle of a fight? Like, and, and it's
Well, it
like,
could be argued they're not for front lines. They're supposed to be for bases.
right, but you're gonna get people who build them on the front line, and like, I don't know if this is a legitimate thing or if people are doing it because I think a howitzer can only aim so low. And something that I've seen done, and I don't know if this serves a purpose, is they build a gate in front of it, a tier 2 gate, because you could open and close it. So it's a really cool feature on the front where you're fighting on the front lines and someone builds a gate in front of your howitzers and you need to fire the howitzers, so you open the gate and you fire, and then all of a sudden you have a couple of machine guns coming your way. You just close the gate and you fix it. I don't even know if the gate.
This is a howitzer. Howitzers
Yeah, like,
they can go right over the wall. They don't need to open.
but that's the thing, is that the point of it is to see. This is why I was confused. I was like, what the hell's the point of the wall? Is that actually a legitimate thing? Like, I thought maybe if the gun aimed too low, it wouldn't work. Like, if you're trying to fire a little closer
Mm-hmm.
or a little further, like you're at the 45-degree angle to fire the farthest, if the wall being so close served as a means of stopping the gun from going through it. I've never tested it. I've seen it like a couple of times, and I'm looking around like, this legit, or is it just for the sake of the rule of cool? Which, are you familiar what the rule of cool is?
I'm not.
It's a Dungeons and Dragons term, and what it is if the rules do not dictate that the players should do this, or like the rules are not specific onto the actions the players are going to take, always lean into the rule of cool. If what your players are doing is cool, let them do it. And Foxhole is a perfect game for the example of something like this happening. Like, if if in reality the howitzer, if it aimed too low, the wall wouldn't close or open. that's really cool to think that someone thought of using a gate as a means of letting the howitzers aim lower and then being able to aim them back up and then closing the gate to protect them. Like that's like if Foxhole could expand somehow on that dynamic, it would be fun because in my personal opinion right now, forward bases of operations are not dynamic and they're not fun. And true, you can put them anywhere. True, you can put anything in them, but what are they used for 9 out of 10 times? There's somebody on a road pushing up they take 80 meters of land, they put another base down so they can spam defenses, and then they do it again. They repeat the process. 80 meters, fob, AI defenses, build defenses. 80 meters, fob, build defenses. I almost want to say let's try a war where there's more towns. You know, like I think Umbral might be a perfect example of this. Umbral Wildwood
Okay.
is you have 2 towns. I think there's 5 towns in total: Stray, Amethyst, Century, Golden Root, Ranch, and Foundry. If you could not have fobs between those, and you had to have more widespread infantry fights, I think people would be less inclined to use a road because you use a road now because it's safe. It's the direction of the war. It's a lane of combat, like a MOBA. Like, you know, you're in your lane. Your lane is this road. You're following it. And if you take a split at the road, all of a sudden your MOBA has changed because now you have another lane to follow because Logi is following behind you. You know, if you try to push a front without Logi, you're going to be shooting pistol rounds. So you know, oh, and there's Hermit's Rest, obviously, the freaking capital of the thing. So, you know, if you started with uh, Golden
Golden Root Ranch in the west.
Golden Root Ranch, Foundry, and the city to the south that I can't remember. I think it's Century.
Century. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're at those 3, and then you're fighting for Hermits, Amethyst, and Stray. You know, your lanes of combat become the bridge crossing over into Foundry, because the riverway, you can't cross it with gear. But Hermits, your fight towards Golden from Century, you know, you got that whole area between the 2 towns where you'd be fighting, and you wouldn't put a fob, but you would put a fob between Century and Golden. But what happens if you remove the fob between Century and Golden, or the fobs between them? You know, you don't have AI defenses. You don't have a safe route. Would a player be more inclined to squad up to move in groups of 5, 6, or 7? Because that's another problem with this game is dying has the only consequence of you're respawning at the nearest fob. You know, you're not spawning back at a town. You're spawning at the nearest fob with shirts. It's if you ever go play the game squad, you can only spawn at the nearest rally point, which involves you, your commanding officer, and I think another guy. So 3 in total to put this rally down. And then there's a 50 or 60-second timer loop. I haven't played this game in a long time, where you can respawn, or you have to respawn at the nearest forward base of operations. And you can't spam these because there's a radio radius where you're not allowed to build another fob within this radio radius, and it means that all of a sudden this team-based game is between squad leaders cooperating and saying where a base should be built, and it's more dynamic because though there might be a meta behind it, like you should put one here because you get cover from here and you can shoot here. If someone gets the idea, ooh, let's go do something cool over here, it's fun, and that it could turn into a new meta. But the current meta is build a fob, build defenses, build a fob, build the defenses, build a fob, build the defenses. You're gonna get a cheeky breaky guy who goes behind enemy lines with a couple of guys, builds a fob, puts some shirts in it, and then runs some really fun partisan ops for quite a while. But overall, if you did that with too many people, you could have 100 players versus 100 players, but if you pull 30 from the front and your 70 is getting crushed by 100 just so you could spend the time to do a flank, that flank better pay off really well. Or if by the time you are executing this flank and your entire line is fallen, you just collapse the whole front, and what do? You know, it's 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 the problem with being able to spam so many bases, and you can move things forward as it happens. Your logi follows you on the road. You put a forward base, you know, we always, Winter Legion Logistics, we supply the second forward base. So if there's one right outside Abandoned Ward, unless I know that's walled, secured, well equipped, and there is like 30 or 40 players there, and the enemies are on the defensive, I'm not supplying it. I'm going to supply the next defended one. Because if you lose that front one, you're not going to lose 45 minutes of driving, 30 minutes of driving, and the cook time, the processing time, the equipment time to field that goods. Uh, but, you know, it still comes down to another issue: is if someone overstocks, someone overstocks.
Sure, and wrapping it up here as well. When a war ends, right? When a war ends, it usually leads to, I mean, for now, resistance, but even at the end of resistance, it just resets. It's a hard reset of the world. Nothing matters from the previous conflict, uh, save your memories of it. But in terms of persistence between wars, there is none. It's a hard reset. How does that make you feel? Does it affect you at all, as someone who invests so much time building these resources for everyone to use, and then to see it all go away at the end of a conflict? What are your thoughts on that?
Win or lose, the fact that I have a lot of communication with clans and groups,
Hmm.
and I'm always talking to them about their supplies and how things go, and they're always so grateful, win or lose, for the amount of supplies. They, I remember a couple of individuals personally say that Winter Legion Logistics, had they not worked so diligently in War 36, it would have been over days earlier, because Winter Legion Logistics filled Lockheed to the brim. We were doing our best to fill that. And just even if we lost the war, it was the fact that we had fun doing it. And the hard resets, oh well, it's a game. It's fun. We're going to come at it again. The dynamic maps make it fun, because it's not going to be the same thing over and over again. It's not, okay, guys, we ran this strategy last time. It worked, or it didn't work because we lost the war. What can we change? The dynamic maps change. If, like, I didn't have water logi, it becomes a whole new nightmare of, you know, instead of spamming supplies, I have to send quality over quantity. Uh, where if I have water logi, it's just quantity. I enjoy it, but something about the hard resets is the first couple of days, like the first day, I should say, is a nightmare, because you need to have, if you
It's
started the
a
war,
nightmare, and it's a bad nightmare. You don't like it.
it's a, you know, first of all, thank you that caches are gone. I don't like caches. They, so much for a new war, but it doesn't matter if the winning side was able to save. You know, like they had all the dynamic resources. This is an issue with caches. The winning side takes. No, they have all the sulfur fields. They defend the sulfur fields during the resistance phase. We can't get howitzers. We can't get satchel charges. If they start the war with satchel charges, the tech tree is a nightmare for logistics as well. Uh, you know, I don't like playing wars with caches, because uh, it's like, why should I make this equipment this war when I should have just had I could have had 1,000 crates of HMGs, 1,000 crates of satchel charges at the start of a war, when you can't rebuild forts, you can't you can't do a lot of things, where you have this team with all this equipment that just can't fight against. You know, what do you do against the HMG when it's killing your foxholes? Um, Somebody would argue build pillboxes. Or you build pillboxes, okay, I need to build an omnidirectional pillbox to stop this one guy with an HMG. Um, I really wish resistance phase was replaced with a preparation phase. Have the map established. Like, for example, if we were to repeat War 37 with the split down the middle with these tiles, uh, the 3 contested tiles, turn them off, make it so that wardens and colonials can't fight each other, um, and let wardens and colonials prepare. You know, maybe some communication will happen, and it's, hey, why are you building a fob there? Well, I want to do this. And it's like, okay, well, sure, we can do that. It's we can build defenses. We can stop partisans from starting the early war harassment. That you get in your truck, you drive to a site, and all of a sudden, some guy with an HMG shows up, and it's like, oh, I got a hammer and a pistol. What am I going to do? Or he's got a revolver, and you just don't have cached equipment. Uh,
There's been talk about some sort of ceasefire phase or preparation phase, and many things of the like. That certainly would be interesting to toy with, and yeah, it's resistance and something like a preparation or buildup is not exclusive in any way, but maybe you can have both. But yeah, just some time to build back up, and rather than have every single war start off in this mad dash to
yep.
uh, to get going, and it might also give people a chance to participate in a preparation if you have it spread over a couple of real days, as opposed to, well, you missed the first 12 hours of the war, and that's kind of your problem,
That
right? So
it like any war game, you got the snowball effect. The only way to mitigate the snowball effect in this game is by having AI defenses. Um, if you had one day of preparation, even if you had like, no, it would have to be like a day or two. It would have to be a couple of days of preparation. My for my logistics group, this harbor base that we've been working on for so many days, that without any harassment, without having to worry about supplying certain fronts, um, it would have been done before the war started, and I would have probably moved more goods in bulk than I've been currently doing because it's just less of a drive, it's less of a headache. And you get more players in on it, and they say, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm building a harbor base so that I can move freighters, you know, 2 tiles instead of 4 or 5." Preparation allows colonials to intermingle, chat, communicate. Uh, you can literally take new players around the map, this wonderful world that the developers have built, and you can explore it. You can run training ops in places where you think you're going to be fighting. You have time to build garrison supplies, which are a nightmare. Uh, you know, if somebody starts building defenses and no, and they just don't make sense, you could be like, "What are you doing?" And you can have a communication about it. Teach it would be a perfect time to also teach players. I would love to teach players how to do logistics, but if I'm in the middle of filling an emergency order of grenades or rifles or like shirts are always an emergency. A front that's got no shirts has got no lives. It's got nothing, and it'll collapse real quick. Sending 80 shirts is priority number one. Hell, sending 15 is better than sending nothing right away. But if I had a couple of days, you know what? I don't even care about producing anything. Turn the factories off, delete the factories, and give us a building preparation time. That's it. You're going to get players who abuse the mechanic of there's literally a wall of pillboxes on the enemy side. Well, congratulations, you just spent a billion BMATs on pillboxes and foxholes and defenses. I'll build one howitzer, and anything with 175 meters is gone because without concrete bunkers or the tech to do so, the fight's not going to mean anything against a wall of howitzers. But why shouldn't players have this really cool idea where, okay, the fighting's going to take place here, let's build a howitzer base before the fighting starts? Get everybody together, do something cool. Let people build their little clan bases where they can do recruiting. You can put a clan base in the middle of nowhere and be like, hey, we're recruiting, we're teaching people how to play the game, come join us. um, Hell, you could probably extend this as an event where it's just a day of peace, and everybody gets to drive around in giant tanks, and you're playing paintball because you're not actually killing people or something. Just do something silly. Because something I love about Foxhole is its community, but the community can't spend any time together short of yelling at each other if you're losing about why we're losing, or if you're winning, it's you don't have time to do anything because you still have to supply the front. It becomes a game of community, but it's also people getting mad at each other for silly things due to either language barriers, no communication, and you're getting frustrated because you're in the middle of I need to do this or we're going to lose the war. And there's just no community. I think Dead Harvest will be amazing for it.
Yeah, a very dysfunctional and hard-pressed community, but maybe a little breathing room would help as well. Well, you know what, Cronus, we could keep on going for several hours more. But this has been a lot of ideas, a very unique look into your psyche and your take on things. So I'm glad we took the time to do it. KronusWinter of the Winter Legion Logistics. People can find you on the battlefield. Usually, you're running an operation. Is that correct?
Uh, if you log on right now, which no matter when you're listening to this, be it 3 days from now or 4 days from now or a year, if I'm still playing this game, and you're gonna see the Winter Legion Logistics, it almost runs 24/7 now. I just have to give credit to everybody in the group that this game is a team effort, and I love them. And I'm going to quickly apologize to them because I said "I" at the start of this this video, and it's a bad habit of mine because I give the commands and I give the orders, and it's like when you're running the kitchen, you're the chef, and it's you, but it's actually your line cooks who are making the food, and or in this case, it's it's my cooks making the B mats. It's a nightmare. It's
Well,
a nightmare.
whether it's a kitchen or a factory or a supply line, someone needs to hold the whip. So someone's got to do it. Well, Cronus, thank you so much. Seriously appreciate you taking the 2 hours here to take time with us here at the Press Corps.
That was 2 hours.
That was 2 hours. I'm clocking it.
Crap.
It's officially just crossed into 2 hours right now.
Hey, talk about what you love. It just goes.
Yeah, really, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. There's so much I've wanted to just talk about this game, and just being able to vent and this I love this format. I love this format for what this game is, and I really hope the developers listen to it. I would love to help this game grow, because if this is a game that I had to play, if I had to pick a game right now to play for the rest of my life, even though the game is in its current state, I would still play it. I would still play this game because it is a unique experience that you can't find anywhere else. Even on like games like PlanetSide that have these giant wars, you're not getting something like this. The logistics
I'm gonna
make
stop
this
you
game
right there
so
because
unique.
I could go into
I know,
that
I
a
know.
lot. I'm 4 years removed.
We gotta go.
Yeah. Well, also I've spent 4 years of my life in PlanetSide, so.
Oh my god, I love that game.
Well, anyway, thank you. I'll stop the recording right now.